My name is Matt McGee. I am the founder of At U2, and a very small amateur radio background, so I'm excited to do this session. I invited a good friend of ours to help do the session. You may know Mary Cipriani if you've ever listened to the U2 marathons, that WBWC, correct? That you've done for what, 10 or 15 years? 12 years.
10 out of the past 12 years.
With Todd, who is sitting right there. Then this is Mary from the U2 Marathon. That's Todd from the U2 Marathon. And Mary grew up in the Cleveland area. She knows Cleveland radio. She has more radio experience than me. I thought Mary would be fantastic to help out with this interview. Because we are speaking to a radio legend in this area. Is that accurate to say, John? Do you mind that description?
I don't know, legend makes me feel so old, but I guess I am old.
This is John Gorman. John has been in media and communications for more than 40 years. He spent 13 years at WMMS, one little letter off from the station I grew up with, WMMR in Philadelphia.
It's also a great radio station.
Right, exactly. That's the first station I heard U2 on, 1981. He's a member of the Cleveland Association of Broadcasters Hall of Fame, the Ohio Radio and Television Broadcasting Hall of Fame, all kinds of awards, and you met U2 the very first time they came through Cleveland. Let's just start with that. That was what, 1980? No, 1981.
I can give you the exact date after our T-sheet here. April 20th, 1981.
And you were you with WMMS?
Yeah, I said at the time. And what we did is we did a number of live broadcasts. We were very proactive, I guess the word would be, toward new music and playing a wide variety of music. And U2 caught my attention very early because I'm Irish and from Ireland. But beyond that, when I listened to the U2 album, there was something about it I really liked. And I found out I called the label, and Island Records at the time was being distributed by Warner Brothers. And I said, I really had the band come and tell me, we do this Monday night at the Agora, where we broadcast a show live. We also do this thing called the Coffee Break Concert, also at the Agora, where it's the middle of the afternoon, where we do a live rock concert for an hour, commercial free. And I said, I'd like to have U2 do it. And he said, well, this U2, we're only going to do Chicago, Boston, and New York. And I said, well, I'm doing Cleveland. We're a breakout market. We're breaking off a lot of acts. And he said, well, you don't have enough Irish people in Cleveland. And I said, well, we have a pretty good Irish population here. He said, well, we're concentrating on the 3 big Irish cities. I felt like saying, well, okay, that means that the Frankie Valli and Four Seasons are coming out today. You don't promote them in the cities that have the most amount of talent. Come on. But anyway, make a long story short, they did not, in their initial exposure, they did not do Cleveland. But I stayed on. We were playing the album, and it was getting a little bit of reaction, curiosity factor reaction. And they had done that tour with the band where they were the opening act. And there was a chance that, they had some time and they could headline and they had a few days off. So they were both going to go for a Monday night broadcast, which we did. And then we also had to do a coffee break concert on a Wednesday afternoon. This is Wednesday, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. When people are going to a rock club, middle of the week, in the middle of the day, and getting drunk, watching new rock and roll. But so we actually did 2 live broadcasts in 1 week. And the funny thing is, I went to when I saw them the first night when they played I think it was a Monday night, the 20th, April 20th show. They were a little sloppy. They missed a few cues. They were very nervous. They were young, so that was another thing. They looked really young. But there was a determination. When you looked at them, when you looked at Bob, the Edge, or anybody in that band, you saw this determination. And I knew that there was something there. This wasn't the first and last time I was going to see this band. And then when we did the show on Wednesday, which we also carried live, everything's going fine. They do their set, and it's hosted. It was unplugged before unplugged. On MTV, except we had a host, and so they finished up the song, and the host, his name was Benjamin Matthecat, and he says, okay, what are you going to do next? And Bono goes, we just did our set. I said, wait, what's wrong? I said, well, we only rehearsed 45 minutes. We have another, 15 minutes left to go. So I ended up doing a few songs over again to fill up the hour. But I mean, there was something about that band that just stayed with me. I said, this band is going to be big. And I talked to the Warner Brothers, which was, distributing that at the time, and they just really weren't interested in it. Then when October came out, it was almost like they just dropped it on the desk and said, we have a new YouTube. No big deal, they didn't promote it at all. I said, you really have to get behind this band. They ended up doing another night Be a Girl, which also did well, drew more people. And the thing that was amazing about the second date, especially the third date they did, was how much they had matured between the first tour and this tour, to the point that, they look 4 years old. They didn't look like young kids anymore. They actually they aged 4 years at one. And they were much tighter, much more together, had greater stage presence. And yet, the label was completely ignoring them at the time.
When they came to tour October.
Yeah. And the fact is, it was Warner Brothers, and, Warner Brothers approached things differently. And the difference that I noticed is, when it came time for the World Tour, and when New Year's Day came out as the advanced single, it was a whole different ballgame. Atlanta had changed distribution, even though it was in the Warner Brothers Electric Atlantic, owned by the same company. They were independently run labels. And when Atlanta took over distribution of Iowa, they saw and heard something with U2 that Warner Brothers didn't. And so they actively wanted to get behind U2 instead of promoting them, even though they weren't on the Atlantic label. And if you're a subsidiary, you get, you're treated as a second-class citizen to a degree. But they were given a lot of attention, and I was able to really push it, get, Bono on the edge over to the station. And they did a fairly lengthy interview on the air, and I think it's probably one of the best interviews MS has a very rich history of rock and roll. But I put that Bono on the Edge interview in the top 5 of all time. It was just a great interview. These guys just, what they were talking about, and they ended up spending the afternoon in my office. And it wasn't like rock stars. I'm asking about Iowa, let me start arguing about Christianity for about an hour. And then it gave me moments out because Kevin Miller, that's his midnight runners, called. Now, I don't know him, but he's calling to cut some IDs for the station. So I put Kevin Miller on with Bono.
Also Irish, right?
Also Irish. And I'm watching this whole thing transpire, saying, I'm having fun with this thing. And then that night, that was the World Tour, and like the music hall in this town, and it was just an amazing performance. I looked at that and I said, I forget who it was with, but I said, I could see this band being as big as Led Zeppelin. And sure enough.
1983.
Yep.
So we're doing this the same way as we've done the other sessions. As we're talking, we have a lot of stuff we're going to cover here. Becky Myers from U2 is in the back there. If you have questions, we have index cards. Becky has them with her, so just get Becky's attention. She has a mic. We'll get to the audience Q&A as we go. We have a bunch of stuff we want to cover. But anyway, if you have questions for John, just get Becky's attention. So let's talk about the process of getting on radio back then. Because radio has obviously changed dramatically between those days, right?
Dramatically, if you understand.
So like the legend is, 1980, 81, stations like WMMS, stations like WMMR in Philadelphia, Carter Allen in Boston, you hear a band and you can say, I'm going to start playing them on radio. That's how it was.
Well, see, you had two formats. The format really started as progressive rock. That was the initial format name. And then it evolved into this album-oriented rock. That became the industry name. But you have two types of AOR stations. Red stations like, like MMS, like MMR, like, BCN in Boston. We weren't consulted radio stations.
You weren't consulted, meaning what?
Meaning, we didn't have, I'll explain first about the way we work is, we had, and I was shocked when I realized later, we had a lot of autonomy. And so, we had, our job was we had to play whatever music for the station. We had to get ratings, we had to get revenue, I mean, it was a business. But we had the luxury of listening to music and choosing what we felt was best for the audience and get their feedback and approach it that way. As album radio, Payola radio developed, you started having consultants come along. Lee Abrams, Jeff Pollock, people like that. And they would come up with master lists. They would come up with ways saying, "Oh, you should be so free-form and so all that. You should have a little more structure and stick to playing the hit album tracks." So it became difficult as time went on. I would say the majority of AOR album rock stations in America were consulted, and were also very restricted as to what they could add. So it was very difficult for those stations to add new music or add something that was left of center. And let's face it, when U2 first came out, they were left of center. What they were playing guitar and the edge player. There was a slightly different attitude. There was a slightly different sound coming from U2. They got even more distinct and unique as time went on. And so it was difficult in a lot of markets for U2 to get played. But once again, I go back to, like I said, the first time I saw it, there was something in just the way they looked. They had that determined attitude that they were going to win. And I really think the music just won everybody over.
Did you have the freedom, obviously an album would come out and this is our first single, this is our second single, but did you have the freedom to play whatever you
Oh yeah, they had to play, there was
play Surrender or whatever.
Yeah, and sometimes I would get mad saying, well, we're concentrating on this one track. And I said, well, you're concentrating on this one track. We like this one too. So, I mean, it was the usual yin and yang, with labels, but in those days it was different. You had enough stations in the country that had the freedom, and having the freedom also gave you influence. If you started picking the right music, and then the consulting stations would see what you were doing, and they would add it for their stations. That's how you would create something from happening. Then the managers are taking that to the booking agents and saying, "Get me a tour together," and that's pretty much how it worked. And the labels would back it, with advertising and concert tour support and everything else.
And then Clear Channel happened?
Well, we're shooting a little ahead. I mean,
right. I'm skipping a bunch there, but it's obviously.
Yeah. But that's a very big part of the story. And what happened is, U2 really established themselves. In 1983, you had something else. We were all up tonight. There was something else going on, which was music was changing. You had new wave, you had modern music, you had all these things. You had new formats coming in. You had an alternative music format that was playing things that were a little left of center, a little quirky. And there's mostly coming out of college radio. College radio plays a very important part of it. College radio played a very important part of NMS. I would always pay attention to what the college stations were doing. And if there was something there that I heard wasn't being promoted by the record guys that I wasn't aware of, I'd seek that out. But what happened was U2 managed, as they grew, and I'm getting back into, by the Joshua Tree, they're superstars. They own album rock radio, they own alternative radio, they've had hit singles on top 40, so they're now an established band. And, there were very few bands in the 80s that really reached what they did. And I looked at them as, in a lot of ways, they were the last great superstars from multi-format, from multi-rock format. They crossed over not only from album rock, but to alternative, to top 40. So, I mean, they're getting a wide range. The top 40 is important to labels because that's usually the first music that people listen to, the kids listen to when you're young. And you sort of form your musical, the top 40 back then played the best of all worlds. They played the best dance music, the best rock, the best pop. So, you would form what kind of music you grew up to like from listening to top 40 initially. And so you two would target really all the important radio formats. And they established superstars, probably the last great superstars on radio at that time. But what had happened was, in 1996, you had something passed called the Telecommunications Bill. And it was a Telecommunications Act. And it was a very important bill because the bill had been originally written in the 1940s, and it would be revised television, that they'd add things in. I mean, this is dealing with everything from telephony to radio and television broadcasts to pagers, everything. And you now have digital coming with all these changes that are happening, and especially in the phone systems. The phones have gone from being monopolies to, open market. So this was a law that had to be written. So the telecommunications bill was really more about telephony and other forms of communication, and it very little to do with radio. As this bill was going through Congress, a senator by the name of Payola, you all remember him, he tacked on, which is what you would do in those days, he tacked on the radio revisions to the telecommunications bill, which is why usually when a bill is introduced to Congress, you have hearings. And, people find out, well, you're going to change things from a company that can only own X number of radio stations, can own unlimited stations in a single market, and can own up to, 1,200 stations nationally. Well, there were never any hearings on it, and the reason being is it was deliberately held back from the telecommunications bill, but it was tacked on as it was sailing through Congress. And as we know from, our House and Senate today, nobody reads the bills. It's all partisan and all that. It wasn't as bad then as it is today. But nonetheless, when the radio versions were added by Bob Bill, nobody even looked at them. So this bill gets signed into law, and even most people who worked at radio stations had no idea that this was about to change everybody's life. Because what it did was it eliminated all restrictions. I mean, there was a time when you had a company could only have 7 AM, 7 FMs, and 7 TV stations. And if you bought a station, you had to hold it for 3 years, and you had to have a year's operating expenses and estimate. And then they loosened up the law as time went on because the radio stations always complained. I didn't mind that law. I didn't mind the restrictions that we had to have X number of newscasts and public service announcements and all that. So be it. May the best man win. I never had a problem with that. But this was making it an honor system. So stations now they don't have to be obligated to run public affairs, public service, news, or anything like that. It's an honor system. You guys can do it. You don't have to keep an eye on you. So, but the biggest change was the fact that you could own a limited number of radio stations. They did have a cap that you could only own up to 50% of. You could have up to 50% of the income in the market. So you could own 4 or 5 radio stations in the market. But if you started showing that you were getting 60% of the revenue, you may have to get up the station. That immediately was thrown up because that was restraint of trade. And it was a law that you couldn't enforce. So anyway, we'll fast forward to the fact that stations would be bought on stations that were signed for $5 million one day, were signed for $15 million by the end of the week, and $25 million by the end of the following month. That's how fast it was going. And it was buying around, figuring out to do it later. You had stations that were bought on Monday and sold on Tuesday and sold again on Friday, as the big fish were gobbling up the little fish.
And instead of having, 7 or 8 stations, each owned by different companies, the end result of this is that
you had it 7 or 8 owned by one company.
By one company, a big conglomerate.
Yeah. And these stations, these companies who were buying were paying top dollar, because now it's like they're selling with real estate, saying there's only so many frequencies, there's so many stations per market. It's real estate. It's only going to go in value. Well, just like real estate itself, that repeats to everything. And you had stations selling for 20, 30 or more times cash flow. One station in Cleveland actually sold for 38 times cash flow. There's no way you could ever make that money back. These are stations that are selling for $30, $40 million. There's no way you can make that back in any way. And so you have to go, you have buying people are going to buy it, and the business plan of all these companies like Clear Channel, like Cumulus, CBS, was we'll buy it now and we'll figure out what to do with the later. Well, when later came, it was like, what do? We're living off radio advertising, we can't increase the rates, there's no way that we can service this debt. So they came up with a great idea, we're looking for non-traditional revenue. And non-traditional revenue initially meant we'll put on job fairs, we'll do other things that we can generate money with. But the Clear Channel and a company called J-Co merged, and they then became the largest radio company in America. The CEO of that company, his name is Randy Michaels, said, I got it, let's make Payola legal. And what he did was, said, he came up and there were enough loopholes in the telecommunications bill that you could do this, and there were enough loopholes in FCC law to do this, that if you made Payola legal, and you charge people for airplay, charge them just like you charge for a commercial, and as long as you identify that on your radio station, all of the music you're playing has been paid to be heard, there's nothing illegal about it. And we're paying taxes on it, we're adult there, we're taking all this money up front. Well, there's one problem. You can't have collusion. You can't have one company pay another to do business. So the way around it was the record companies went to these independent record promoters. And these independent record promoters, they work for themselves, but they would serve guns for hire. So the labels would pay them to wear the radio stations for profit. And however they get the music on the radio stations, they don't care. They're paying these guys to just be independent promoters. So what the independent promoters are doing is they're charging the labels roughly $3,000 per station. And it's larger if it's a wide market station, small if it's a small market station. But an average of $3,000 to get your song played on, added on a radio station. And all these independent promoters also on retainer too for everything they're worth. So what happened was that as soon as Clear Channel put in this practice, everybody else followed through because everybody had the same problem. They had it that they couldn't service. So radio stations started adding music, not for how good the music was, and not for the quality of music, but whoever paid the most amount of money to get their music played got added.
At what point is all this? Is
This is 1999, 2000. Okay. You know, in this.
So in U2 terms, this is
Post-pop.
Post-pop.
Post-pop. I don't think U2 pop fell short of expectations. You know, pop was not a radio-friendly album. It was, in a lot of ways, I like the album, but as far as radio and the audience, it wasn't quite meeting the mark. It was, it was an experimental, it was a little dancing, it was a little, and so the album rock stations weren't touching it. The alternative stations weren't really playing it like they played in the past. And, in all honesty, I think that U2 lost touch a little bit because they'd been away too long, and the tour they did also, I mean, how do you talk Octane Bay? How do you talk Zoo TV? That was the Sergeant Pepper of tours. And so, everybody was a little lost. But then they had, that long time off, and all of these changes happened. And even if the changes didn't happen, when you have a period of time where an act doesn't have any music out, they have to reestablish themselves. They may have been superstars at one time, 2-3 years ago, when you got into their album, you're kind of forgotten. Your old stuff stops getting played, and you don't have any new stuff to play. So, when they put out the Greatest Hits album, they put that number track like The Storm on. And so this was right around the time they had now gone through this payola. Any stations playing popular music, including some college stations, were now doing this paid play. And so Paul McGinnis is saying, manager U2 is saying, hey, U2, I don't have to pay, I'm not going to pay to get the records played. And the reason he said that is, when the labels were paying the independent promoter to get the music on the air, the independent promoter was also cutting his own deal with the radio station. He goes to the radio stations and to make it all legal, he says, I'll give you, depending on market size, anywhere from $100,000 a year to $500,000 or more a year if you let me work you exclusively with music, which meant I'm going to be your playlist for you. So you're getting this, and as far as the radio stations go, well, they just added that income to the bottom line. That helps with the debt service. That helps with when they have to answer to the banks. Where's our money? Well, hey, we're going to this amount of money, and nobody cares. The banks just want their money. How banks are. So, the problem is when the labels were doing this pay-for-play, they don't take it out of their own money. They take that as promotional marketing that comes out of the royalties of the band. And, you know, any band that, you know, when bands signed to labels in the old days, they never realized that when that label was buying those billboards and Sunset Strip and everything else, that's going to have their own. Labels, that's not going to have their own problems. So any act that would say, you know, let us go to the managers of the bands and say, look, we want to work this at Top 40 and Album Rock, and we want to work this at all the labels. You know, it's going to cost us roughly $3,000 per station we work with. We're going to be taking out of your revenue. So I could say they're going to say, I'm not taking out my royalties. Yeah, I'm you too. So anyway, what happened is, Electric Stone gets released worldwide. It was number one in Canada. It was top 5 for most of Europe. In America, it didn't get played. Radio did not play. There were very few radio stations. And most stations that played were college stations. But other than that, I would say 99.9% of the commercial radio stations did not touch the storm. A song that was number one right across the lake. So, the Guinness number was less than he had a new album coming out pretty soon. So, Beautiful Day was released ahead of that album. What McGinnis did was, okay, it cost me $3,000 and to get on the station and get airplay. I'll pay $6,000. So what McGinnis did is he paid double the going amount of what they ended up calling the industry a double spec to ensure getting airplay on all the important Top 40 and Album Rock and Alternative and even a few college stations to ensure that airplay. And that's why the Beautiful Day became a hit. They would have had a hard time if they didn't do that, as is. But had they, you know, let's say Payola and a half, you two had other problems that they had not been active in radio for a few years. And people at the radio stations, they look at, well, you know, the band isn't as big as they used to be. It's wrong, you should judge everything on merit, but most people don't. And so the end of the Beautiful Day ended up getting all the airplay, and the way they reestablished themselves was the fact that they paid dearly for that. They paid a lot of money for that.
And I would have, I'm guessing that people in the audience are saying, are you kidding me? Right? This is legal.
It was perfect.
But is it, like I remember when I think of the word Payola, I think of, what was it, the 50s?
Yeah.
It's a different kind of thing?
Well, okay, in the 50s, Payola was different in the 50s in the sense that it was all over the table. And the way it worked back then is usually a band would give up its publishing rights or something like that. And, you know, that's how it would make, you know, the money to pay. And the labels, once again, the labels did, in those days, the people who worked for the labels would directly go to the program director, the music director, the disc jockey on the air, and, you know, send them some money and say, hey, can you play this next? Because it was loose in those days. But, and for the most part, it was wrong, because music should be added, the public airwaves, music should be added to America. It should be added by who paid the most amount of money to play. But, there's one other about Payola. Had it not existed back in the 50s, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and even the Everly Brothers, for that matter, wouldn't have gotten airplay on Top 40 radio. Because when Tutti Frutti came out, the Top 40, the late white Top 40 radio stations all played Pat Boone's version. They didn't play Little Richard. The other Little Richard ever been paid is he had to pay to play. He had to, you know, and it was the old-fashioned way of, you know, slipping $100 on a tape. Now, the way all of these people were caught, Payola wasn't illegal back then. It was made illegal in a lot, but Payola was not illegal. What was illegal was the fact that none of these people were paying taxes. And that's why, you know, Dick Clark was one of the guys who was taking it, but Dick Clark, he had a better word than Alan Freedman, because Dick Clark says, you know what, I'll pay the taxes, and I'm really sorry, but I'll never do it again. You know, instead Alan Freedman tried to fight it, and Alan Freedman was bigger. But still, nonetheless, back then, the only good thing the Payola did was black music I don't know that political rights stations had not been for Payola. But in this particular case, all you're doing is subsidizing these people like Clear Channel that already paid too much. They were greedy, paid too much for these, just to own popular culture. And in Clear Channel's case, I'll take it one step further. U2 had to, initially, what's called Live Nation today was Clear Channel Concerts. And it was owned by Clear Channel. And the way it worked is not only did you have to pay Clear Channel to get played, but if you didn't go through and Clear Channel was, the biggest, they had the most amount of radio stations of any radio group, far ahead of number 2. So, they had 1,500 radio stations in America. They could also say to the acts, if you don't do your concert, if you don't let us produce your concert, because now they've got to follow concert promoters. These are Belgian productions, not Belgian productions, Clear Channel. But if you don't go through our service, well, all the money in the world we don't play your music. And, I couldn't care less about Britney Spears, but Britney Spears was a superstar for a moment. And she made the mistake, her ass made the mistake of going with AEG, a rival company, instead of Clear Channel, to produce her concert tour. I think it was probably the song that had the snake, whatever that was. I don't know.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Promise that.
Yeah. And whatever the case, Britney Spears, when she went with AEG, instead of Clear Channel Concerts, to do her national tour, airplay disappeared. They didn't even accept money to get airplay. Airplay just disappeared. So what happened was, you had this dictatorship by Clear Channel that really governed what we saw here. And it's Clear Channel's way of looking at it. If we own the majority of airplay, if we're the most influential because we have the most amount of radio stations, if we're also producing the shows, we own popular culture. And that's how they looked at it. That was the reason why Clear Channel bought the concert business and did all that. And there's only one thing that none of these radio stations even thought of, and that was the internet. They thought that, hey, they can never touch us. People have to listen to radio. You get in your car, you have captive audience. Janice Funds that was working Clear Channel to buy the stock and all that. That was in their pitch. Was people have to listen to radio. You have a captive audience to radio. And that's how they looked at it. So, and the other thing is nobody ever thought of the internet. But nonetheless, from 1999 until, who was the Attorney General of New York that got caught with the hooker in Washington? Elliot Spitzer. What happened was Elliot Spitzer got wind of the fact that it really started with a conversation of how did radio get so bad? And said, well, and somebody told Elliot Spitzer, here's how it works today, here's how a song gets played. He or somebody in his office was really complaining about why is the music so good. There's all this great music coming out, why isn't it getting played on the radio? Why isn't, 5 labels are getting all the airplay and most of it's crap. And then he found out about pay for play, and what he did is he went after the New York radio stations, the New York State radio stations, and saying, I want more information on this. Well, it made radio look bad. The average consumer did not know that all these radio stations were taking Payola. And, make a long story short, that embarrassment and the fact that it was being investigated, because here's the other problem. When everybody is now paying to get played, there's still only so many slots to get, you're releasing 70, 80 songs a week. Out of 70, 80 songs, only 3 or 4 of them are going to get airplay. But yet, so many people are paying to get played, there are so many that are, go through and actually get the airplay. Just like what McGinnis did, paying $6,000 instead of $3,000 per station to get electrical storm played. Well, then you have other people doing that. So suddenly the price is going up and up. And then the other thing is, sometimes the independent promotion man is going to the general manager of the radio station. Because the program director music director no longer had music, the general manager is doing it. And they're saying, hey, how do you have a swimming pool in New York? Well, Joe Mack is not necessarily all honest people, so you have a lot of that collusion, you know, a lot of extra payments going to certain people to get things played. So, that's what Spitzer was encountering. Jesus, how the guy that is in a tiny market, how does he afford $1 million home? It just didn't make any sense. So when Spencer started doing his campaign to Payola, it got national attention, and then stations started backing off a little bit. Now it's bad, but it's done in such a clandestine, unusual way that it's very hard to trace. But to this day, usually something's being played on the radio, there's something attached to it somewhere down the line.
How many folks in the audience also remember around that time frame how many other bands you heard criticism of U2 and you kind of scratched your head and you thought, why are these other bands complaining? And it's because they couldn't afford those royalty payments.
Yeah,
they couldn't afford to compete, and they felt like U2 was contributing to the state of the industry. They could afford to, but it was making it really hard for any new rock band because they didn't have the royalty, they didn't have the infrastructure, they couldn't compete, and they were turning to U2 in this leadership position and saying, dudes, why are you doing that? Don't do that. You're making it hard for the rest of us.
Well, I guess you could say, but it's like, how many statues on it whistleblowers? That's the problem. Yeah, I'm sure McGinnis could have taken it the other way, and he could have gone public, and he could have said, do you realize that, I have this, I can't get this record played unless I'm paying all these radio stations money. But he chose, and I can kind of understand too, he went through, he started with Island Records, and now he's on Universal. And then Universal merged with that, what was that? The French company and all that. So you had all of that going on. So you have all this turmoil. I mean, he's now, he started answering to a record label once upon a time. Now he's answering to a multi-level corporation. So it probably reached a point, in his viewpoint, it's like, hey, I can't fight this thing. This is the way it goes. This is the way it goes. Is it right or wrong? If that was the only way to get into it, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be the one to cast moral judgment and say that you two should have, walked away and exposed everything. Because, something, I don't think that any radio station will go and play them again. Because the radio station is still owned by those companies and taking all that money.
Let me read you 3 quotes from Bono, and I imagine this is what a lot of people want to ask about and want your opinion on. October 2010, Bono talking to the Australian paper The Age. He says, the biggest challenge now, this is just 3 years ago, the biggest challenge now will be getting a song on the radio. That's our drug of choice now. I don't know if we will achieve it. It takes a radio programmer saying, I want that feeling on my station, and they may not. It will be very hard for you two to dominate the radio now after no light on the horizon, but we're going to try. A year later, October 2011, Bono in the Irish Times. We can play the big music in big places, but whether we can play the small music, meaning for the small speakers of the radio or clubs where people are living, remains to be seen. I think we have to go to that place again if we're going to survive. A month later, November 2011, Bono, Q Magazine. Getting songs played on the radio is very important to us. I'm not sure we'll ever be #1 on the pop charts again, but we need songs that go outside our audience. This angers a lot of U2 fans.
Well, okay, and I agree with the U2 fans that are angered by it. There's 2 kinds of radio. In Europe, it's different. Now, I don't know, I don't know the particulars on if everything is above board or below, I think it depends on the country and all that. But if you go to Europe and listen to radio, or go online and listen to European radio, it sounds much better than American radio. They're playing a wide variety of music. They're doing it differently. First of all, they didn't have this telecommunications bill that they can buy stations worth far more than they could ever draw in debt. Clear Channel's $20 billion in debt. If you go to Europe, these stations do not have that kind of debt. And they operate on different rules and regulations. So, as far as Europe goes, radio still means something. Both consumers still listen to radio in Europe, and radio still has a great influence in Europe than it does in America. So Bono is somewhat great on that point. But yes, what formats are going to play into today? I don't know. You know, classic rock stations play classic rock. Rock stations usually tend to play new rock. I don't know where YouTube fits in. You know, once again, it should be based on the quality of music. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I don't know what it's like in European radio. In US radio, except for call-up stations and the few independent alternative stations that may be left, I know YouTube can get in there. Most companies today, most radio stations today owned by major corporations. And even if they're owned by smaller corporations, they still have a debt to service. They still are very governed by a great deal of research. And you look at past performances, when was the last time you two had a hit single? Oh, that one? Nah, you don't want one. I mean, it's kind of like that. But here's where Gorman missing something, and it burns me a little bit, is there is a future for all music. And it's a very strong, very good future, and that's the internet. The internet is not governed by anything right now. I mean, you know, there are rules and regulations, but the FCC doesn't govern internet radio, for instance. Anybody can start an internet radio station. You know, Bono can start an internet radio station if he wanted to. The consumers in America are sick of terrestrial radio, AM and FM radio. AM radio is dying. AM radio could be dead in just a matter of 3 or 4 more years. Even big superstations of AM radio are not making money anymore. FM radio, you have too many alternatives. You know, radio used to at least, you know, like Janice Funds for Clear Channel said, you know, when you have captive audience in cars, no more. You know, you can play your iPod, you can listen to internet radio in your car, if you have a smartphone or Bluetooth. And, you know, at this point, we're, 2 years away from where you're going to have routers built in the cars, where you're going to have everybody will have internet radio in your car, they'll have immediate internet access no matter where you are in your car. So that becomes a new radio. I don't know if Bono even care about American radio. It's obsolete already.
So you say, they'll say, when was the last time you had a hit? And that was many years, that was 2005 was the last time they had a big radio hit. Is it also because they're in their 50s now? Is it also because they don't release stuff very consistently? Does the fact that they're old and the fact that they go 5 years out, does that hurt them?
I did one for our office, except I'll tell you as simply as possible. iTunes changed the way people buy music. You know, the internet changed the way people listen to music. Look at what Pandora has done. Look at the amount of listenership to Pandora or Spotify. You know, Pandora is something that if you like a certain artist or a certain kind of music, you know, it'll find other music you may like. You know, after an hour, they start to play the same music, and then when they play a commercial, they go play another one of the songs, but that's artificial intelligence makes good automation. Then you have Spotify, and Spotify has taken the place of having your own record collection. So instead of having, you know, your wall with albums, the CDs, and all that, you know, now you have Spotify, and you pay X amount of dollars for, you know, leasing the master library. So that has changed. You know, you don't go to a record, there aren't any record stores anymore. You know, people are buying CDs. CDs are obsolete now. And, you know, there is that 1/10 of 1% that may occasionally buy a vinyl and just put a romantic edge of it and all that. But that doesn't even show up really as far as important in the sale of music these days. So, you know, getting back to U2, they have a future and it's online. And instead of worrying about, how are we going to get paid? Yeah, over in Europe, it's a little different. You know, internet radio is also very big in Europe. You know, Finland, it's like part of it, it's like AM internet radio. You know, satellite radio is another area he doesn't address. Satellite radio, I think, is peaked. I think it's peaked now because it's now obsolete. It's a separate unit. If you can go to the internet and you can watch everything from your favorite TV program to make a phone call or check on anything at home or your friends or anything like that, I mean, the internet pretty soon is going to do everything to tie your shoes. It's going to open your door. It's going to start your car. It's already doing it. So, the future really is online. The future is mobile and tablets. So I don't think if there is any kind of future at all, that's where you two really have to promote marketing. That's the only place. Forget the radio. And also, forget the old-fashioned forget television. TV networks are dying as fast as radio's dying now. The majority of people in this country now are time shifting, and they're watching their favorite shows and all that at their own leisure. Nobody's saying, oh, it's Thursday night, I can watch Friends. They're watching what they want to watch.
When I grew up listening to Cleveland radio, I mean, that was a unifying factor. Everybody had to tune in, because you knew that Kid Leo was going to debut that new, Springsteen song that afternoon, or then later it was MTV. And it just seems like all this traditional marketing that a band like U2 grew up with and understood how to market, that time has completely shifted under them. Now Madonna did something very interesting on the last tour where she had the #1 album sale, but it's because they bundled the album with the concert ticket.
And those are a combination of Clear Channel and Live Nation. They bought their way on, they ended up on websites and getting X amount of airplay per hour and everything else. But see, here's the other thing. Well, here's another thing. You have one other system that's taking place right now that's slowly growing online. And this is the future. Radio as an art is not going to go away. Radio as we know it, AM and FM, forget it, it's over, we're good. It deserves to die as far as I'm concerned. But, so on a certain purpose. But with internet radio, like I said, you have the Spotify's, you have, Last.fm, you have Pandora, you have all of those things that provide a service. You know exactly what you're getting. I feel like listening to a certain artist, okay, I'll go to Spotify. I'd like to find another artist that sounds like you too. Okay, I'll go to Pandora and all that. But what is missing right now online is what radio originally brought to the consumer, and that was I'll use a bottom line, the element of surprise. And what we don't have right now, you have a lot of terrestrial radio stations that are streaming online, through Clear Channel owns iHeartRadio, so they put all their stations on that. But it's still garbage and garbage up. They're hearing online the same garbage you get turn on the American radio. But you do have a number of internet-only radio stations. There aren't that many of them. Most of them are hobbyists, somebody that really has a passion and a desire, but they don't want to make, they don't know the first thing about business. So they're playing what they want to play. There's Radio Paradise. There's a lot of different stations like that strictly, they're playing independent music, and they're playing what they want to play, and this and that. And those are stations that are interesting. How do you tell there's thousands of internet radio stations, most of them are hobby stations. But what you're about to see happen over the next few months, and especially the next 2 years, is you'll start to see the growth of internet-only radio stations that are doing it right, that are going to be formatted. You'll have alternative, you'll have, adult album alternatives, you'll have rock, you'll have all different formats, that exist in terrestrial radio. And they'll play a lot of their music, but they will be professionally staffed. They will survive by selling advertising, so you'll have commercials, but you won't have the primary radio today, which when you break your music, you have to go 5, 6, 7 minutes of commercials. The reason for that is they're paying a debt service, and also the radio station costs a lot of money. You have to have real estate, put your towers up, you have to maintain your towers, you have to maintain your transmitter, you have to have a legal staff because you're dealing with FCC rules and regulations. So you have a lot of overhead. With internet radio, you have none of that overhead. On top of that, the FCC doesn't even govern it. So I see the future being on internet radio, and internet radio that isn't a national format, but that your regional internet radio stations that strictly serve the region they're in. You know, another problem about national internet radio stations haven't happened is, how do you sell it? If you're a commercial radio station, when you say, well, I have a listener in Des Moines, I have a listener in Flint, I have one in Milwaukee, I have 3 over in Akron, that doesn't work. You know, people want, advertisers want a specific market. So what you're going to see, it's not, I hate the phrase, one door closed, another door open. I hate that phrase, but nonetheless, I know. But when something goes away, something else usually replaces it. And what is going to replace radio as we know is internet radio as we don't know it yet. But that is going to be, that's going to be the next proving ground. And it is going to be not only for you too, but the fact that you don't have that high overhead, you can run fewer commercials, the fact that you are now dealing with internet-based technology. For instance, when I used to do a live promo from the Agora, I did the YouTube copy paper, the YouTube broadcast. I had to pay for phone lines that ran from the Agora, to a recording studio that was in the Agora to the station, and then that had to be fed out to the transmitter, all that. Now, I could simply, if I want to do a live broadcast somewhere, all I have to do is bring a laptop, plug in, and do the necessary programming, and that then I will broadcast live to the world if I want. But, even though you can broadcast to the world, you're going to have internet radio stations that do specific markets, and that's what you'll listen to. But you have a secondary audience too, which is people who grew up in one area, say people who grew up in Cleveland, but they moved somewhere else, but they still keep in touch with the sports teams they grew up with, the music they liked when they were younger and all that. Now you can listen to your favorite radio station anywhere in the world.
We have about 15 minutes left or so. Becky, what kind of questions, how many questions do we
have a few
start doing some audience questions? Is your mic working?
Radio's influence has waned over the past few years. What are your thoughts on how radio can shape or reshape the future of popular music? Can non-commercial acts have a chance on the radio? Maybe covered some of
We got it. They didn't bring up the college radio. College radio is something that I paid attention to for many years because first of all, you're listening to a wide array of music, and you have more time to do so, and you also have specific programming, and out of that specific programming, you can generate even more hours. But
only a college station could play 18 hours nonstop.
yeah, that's true. But that's the thing though, college stations always had one limit, which was bars. They only cover a specific area. You have colleges on the east side of Cleveland that have radio stations you can't get on the west side, and vice versa. And with the internet now, you can hear college radio, you can hear your favorite college radio station pretty much anywhere. So that's changing as well. What we are saying is technology is actually, and this is a good thing, technology is going back in the hands of the consumer. And the consumer is going, and for stations that are trying to make a living, and stations that are trying to gain recognition. And college radio wants to be heard because college has its own business for into college. And the internet is now going to provide that in a way that terrestrial radio no longer can.
Let me ask you about that, the college radio thing. I mean, the legend is YouTube was very interested and marketed themselves quite well to college radio. I was in college radio in the late 80s, and it's my college radio story. October of '88, it would have been. My friend Tim from the college radio station calls me, and this is like 10 days before Rattle and Hum was due to come out, and he says, "Matt, Rattle and Hum just arrived." I cut all my classes. I mean, I didn't. Yes, I did. I'm telling my mom I said that. Went to the and we listened. We sat there for probably 6-7 hours, listened to it nonstop, and we had access to it long before anybody else had that out. At least in our heads. Did they do that? Were they very heavily investing in college radio?
One thing I really like about YouTube is, for the most part, YouTube before commercial radio, I guess, picked up on the band. College radio was first, and they never forgot that. So even in the later albums, even the more recent albums, college radio stations always get it before I did. And that just pissed me off sometimes. This was a market. This used to be a highly competitive radio market, and getting the new album first was very important. But I didn't mind that. I didn't mind the fact. Yeah, the college radio stations initially were behind them, and it's great that Donna, it's great band that I forgot that. But at the same time, you talk about a marketing expert. I don't know whether it's Bono or it's McGinnis or it's a combination or it's somebody else in the band, but they knew how to work all formats. And the reason I say that is, Bono could appear as a surprise guest on stage at an REM concert, for instance, or a Springsteen concert, whatever. Okay. But at the same point, he also showed up as a surprise guest at a Kylie Minogue concert. Now, most of you fans, I don't think also have Kylie Minogue's album. But he knew to reach a wider audience that he had to go after that top 40 audience. He had to go after, he couldn't just limit himself to being a rock star. He had to be a pop star as well. And I thought that he did that very well. I think the only time that they went off base was the pop album. And I don't know, there's probably people would debate that, I don't know.
And also for college radio, I always felt that there were enough side projects and interesting things. So even at the same time, the War album's out, and there's that big, we're going to turn a big commercial push behind this band. Edge is doing the Captive soundtrack, which is, okay, this one belongs to the college stations, because we knew, as adventurous as MMS was going to be, we weren't going to play anything off the Captive soundtrack. So it's like, ha, that one's still mine. and we could play those tracks, and there was always, it seemed like no matter what was released, if it was a B-side, a soundtrack, a guest appearance, there was always some, bonus side project thing that was still going to stay just in the college.
And they also did interviews just for college, right? There were several. That kind of thing. 2 questions. One from John, I think it's Ballard, and then one not named, but both very similar. You discussed the Great War era interview, one of your top 5 interviews that you did. One question is, why was it? How was it the interview so good that it became one of your top 5? The other question is, does a recording of the interview exist and can it be made available? Of course we do.
Don't get me started.
There are no secrets. The internet has ended all secrets. So the second question first, that interview is available. On top of that, so is I found the we call the spot, the commercial for that YouTube concert. What else did also the YouTube ID, I found that.
Oh, okay.
I don't have radio at the edge, but the first part of that question again.
Why was it one of your top 5?
What made it?
Bono and Ed were just, first of all, Kid who's the actor, he asked all the questions, and Bono and the Edge gave all the right answers. It wasn't the typical rock and roll, how's the tour going and all that. That's not the way we would do an interview. And also the fact that Bono would answer a question, and the question would then take the conversation into a totally different area. And it was a combination of Leo being a good listener. Leo was able to shift with Bono, but also that Bono was able to shift and never stopped being interesting. Everything that he said was interesting. He was talking about, he was wide-eyed, he was still very wide-eyed back then, learning about America and learning about, and he had very strong opinions about music. And he was expressing those, usually you get a band wants to talk about themselves. He was also talking about how he perceived music in general. And it just made for I'm sure that this interview is going to be online for the next couple of weeks. And, do you have a copy already?
I've got a cassette buried somewhere.
Yeah, I found a nice clean copy of it, so within the next few weeks, we'll find a way to get online. It'll be on Facebook and everything else. So,
Let us know.
Yeah. I'll make sure you
We'll
get it.
let the online fans.
Because it really is a good piece of U2 history too, because it was at that point. See, the other thing that I admire about U2 is, like as I was saying earlier, music was changing. You know, you had, like I said, the modern music thing, you had alternative, you had new wave, everything was just changing rapidly with music. It wasn't the 70s anymore. And U2 found a way to embrace all of the 70s music people as well as all the new music 80s people as well.
Becky, any other questions? If you have one, go ahead.
So I grew up with MMS, and I remember taping the radio when I heard that Light of Day was going to be on the old Joe and Jet song. I was just waiting for that as a 7-year-old trying to tape that. But I want to talk about, I think a bigger problem that we're not talking about here is that who cares about rock and roll anymore? Because, okay, so you're saying that everything's changing, but then in the 2000s, there was like a second wave of Britpop. And so like Keane and Coldplay and Radiohead and all this stuff are putting out albums, and it's fantastic music, you know. But how much do we even hear, like, for what's left? The Killers or Kings of Leon or anything like that on the radio. The radio doesn't care about. And there's money behind music because God knows Bruno Mars is being played and everywhere we go. But the problem is, our band's going to be, can they afford to be even produced anymore? Can they put out an album of quality because they're going to record it in their basement, have some kind of stupid name and play the rock shop? But is there anything that we can do? There's not going to be The Cure anymore. There's not going to be a Nine Inch Nails.
Oh yeah, things like that. See, I disagree. I think they will. First of all, it's far less expensive today to record an album than it was back then. You no longer have to tether yourself to a major label or to a label that is going to take a piece of what you make, and then you're lucky if you can collect your royalties at the time. So, you know, take Nine Inch Nails, a great example. You know, they're going to sell royalties for that first album.
Sure, but here's the thing. So U2 in the basement with great equipment is not the same as U2 in the studio with Brian Eno.
No, but it's all relevant. You know, there was a time when you know you'd have to go to a very expensive recording studio and spend a lot of money, and you'd have to have all this equipment in order to just record an album. Now you can do it on your laptop. You know, now you can do it very simply. There was a time that and I don't agree with all this, there was a time that you needed entire, orchestration to back you up. You needed, if you wanted strings, you had to hire people to play strings. Now you can do it on a synthesizer and all that, but some of that's good, some of that's bad, but the fact is, the consumer has far more control, and today the act also has far more control, because you don't have to be on a major label to be exposed. And the internet is such the internet is where everybody goes for everything. So there's a way for you to promote and market and go after not only your airplane, but getting yourself known, by using social media. And that becomes a whole new avenue, as well as you're going to see this growth of internet radio. It has to exist because there's a need for the element of surprise. People don't want to just turn on something or you don't want to read a book if you already know the ending. You don't want to watch a movie if you already know the plot. You want that element of surprise. And what's missing right now is that element of surprise. That kind of radio that you're talking about will be brought back online.
I guess it goes along with what he was saying. The fact that we can record in a laptop. I mean, I remember a time when I'm a musician as well, a songwriter, where you crafted the song, you wrote it up for a year before you got into the studio. Now, everybody has a record release party. There's a million songs on the internet. It's hard to go through it and find somebody that's put the time and dedication to it, like a YouTube band, that worked on a song like Out of Control and probably played it a million times before we got a chance to hear it. So they got all the notes, you know, they got all the mistakes out of it that they didn't know. That's my only, it seems a little scary to me that you can go into the internet radio now and I can probably get a song from everybody in this room. Because my laptop, like you said, has $1 million studio in it. So I don't need the time to wait and craft a song on the lyrics. Is that way changes like Payola boys did, you know, and hopefully they still do.
Well, I'm sure it was even farther in the 50s than it was in the 60s, and the 60s and the 70s, and recording and releasing and finding a record label to promote you and everything else. It's all relevant. And, you know, what's happening right now, it's finding its way. It's going to find its way through, I know that music is so used as organic, but I mean, it's going to find its own way. What's happening now, it's the whole new system of the way somebody's going to record an album and how it's going to get heard and how it's eventually going to get played on internet radio, or how it's going to be discovered by the writer, or how it's going to get into a motion, on a soundtrack. That's all happening right now as we speak. It's finding its way.
We're in new ground.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's new ground that nobody has any control over yet. And I think it's a lot healthier when an act and the consumer have a little more control over what they create and what they buy.
I think you're right. I think it might be surprising.
Yeah.
What I might create without the
I have a question. You're touching on radio and how certain stations, you have a classic rock station, pop station, and it seems to me YouTube, it frustrates me that they're not on the radio. And why does it take a hit? Why does bands today have to? They can't almost not be artistic the way they want to be. They have to write, songs specific so it can be on the radio. For example, like Boots, I believe, Get On Your Boots, they write that because they want it on the radio. In the old days, the band is almost more in charge. They write their music, their songs, record label picks them up.
It's interesting that you say Boots because that was exactly my impression of that song on the last record, is that they wrote that song and just the style and everything of it was to get it on the radio.
Yeah.
And it drove me nuts because
We were at a YouTube convention here.
Well, yeah, to be good radio, to be a good DJ, you have to put a good set list together. And to me, a U2 song belongs next to a Springsteen song. It belongs next to a Kings of Leon song. U2 does not belong next to a Katy Perry song or a Bruno Mars song. And, so you can write Boots and you can, the record label can get hung up on that's going to be our targeted single. But I think that's like what I was
think you answered the question,
you don't want
because-
to hear it.
Yeah, you answered the question. It is all Katy Perry. It's all one genre. I know it comes down to a buck.
Here's what happened. I think this is happening time and time again. We have the ebb and flow. There was a period of time where the early days of FM radio, especially the mid to late 70s, music was very exciting. There was so much good music out, all kinds of genres. It was all being played on radio. And then we also had competition. You had two album rock stations in the market. Each one was battling it out. And then it comes, well, who's playing the best music? Who's playing the music that's going to reach the most audience? And it's highly compromised. That's something I had to face with every day. I knew I had to play the hits. If I was going to play the misses, I had to sound like the hits. I mean, that's what it came down to. But then there was the other extreme, is that when consultants really get control of album-oriented radio back then, everything that very often went to the corporate rock stage, where, Boston put one of the feeling, and then something in your journey, in your farm, and then within 6 months we had 20 other bands that sounded just like Boston, Journey, or Farm. And, with that, the labels went out and they started signing everybody that sounded like the big hits. And unfortunately, that's just the way it works. If you have something successful, look, Pandora's successful, look at all my imitations of Pandora out there. That always happens. And Then you have a change where somebody does something, when alternative music came along, alternative then becomes mainstream. You know, I have a girl band sound that I considered alternative. You know, when I first heard girl band, I said, this sounds like a band that grew up in the Who. When I first heard sound band, I said, this sounds like a band that grew up in Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath. But they were deemed alternative. So I mean, you have this ebb and flow. Everybody has to put, you know, when you're in the music business, everything has to be put into it has to be compartmentalized. It has to be put into a box. If you're either this, you're that, or the other thing. I think it's wrong, and eventually the consumer wins out, because when we went through that corporate rock thing of everybody trying to sound like Journey and Bad Company in Florida, all that music ended up becoming successful, and you don't hear it today. You know, in U2's case, yeah, I mean, I can understand. Well, it would be great to have a hit single because we know we're going to sell X amount of copies. The reason for the hit single is maybe we can get a new, younger audience, because you often have people that they reach a certain age and music becomes less important. You know, they have other things to worry about. They have family, they have work, they have other things. So music is no longer that big passionate thing that was once so important in their life. So you have to, just for attrition, you have to try to always get a younger audience coming in to replace those people that are no longer active audience.
All right, one last question.
I just wanted to expand on you were talking about boots earlier. Can you? You were talking about boots earlier. I think that's one of the reasons No Line wasn't as big as what it could have been. I think Magnificent probably would have been a better song to release. And in Nashville, I got to sit down and talk with Dallas a little bit, and he asked me, he said, you know, why do you think, as a fan, why do you think the album didn't sell as well? I was kind of shocked, we were just sitting there. And I told him, I thought that Magnificent probably would have been a better single. He said Edge pushed for Boots. He said that he told him that he also thought Magnificent should have been released as a single. So it's kind of interesting that Dallas was so honest.
You're either going to go the Radiohead route that says, I don't care about Airplane, I've got my core audience, I'm going to do my thing. And that would have been the Magnificent.
And I'm worried that they're shifting away from that. That bothers me.
And that's really the
That's what a lot, right? That's
where they're at.
That's what a lot of fans are concerned about. You talk about phrases you hate. Fans hate this idea that they're going to start just making radio-friendly music rather than following their music.
Artistic creative.
Yeah, I mean, I don't find the compromise. I don't like somebody saying, what it was done to have a hit song. I mean, they did that song for some reason of, let's say we're going to talk about song on. I mean, that was, music back of that time, that U2 sounded like back then. That was kind of an unusual song. I remember when I first came to the station, my first graduate was to look for a hit record.
All right, we're